reprise du débat, the Honourable Member for Etobicoke North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak about microbeads, or small plastic beads in consumer products which enter our environment and which can have serious harmful effects. The United Nations Environment Program looked at plastic waste in the ocean in 2011. Since then, concern has grown over microplastics, particles up to 5 millimeters in diameter, either manufactured or created when plastic breaks down. Fish, mussels, seabirds, and zooplankton ingest microplastics, and that's harmful. A growing concern is the increasing use of microplastic in consumer products, namely microbeads in facial cleansers, gels, and toothpaste, which are released into rivers, lakes, and the oceans. Microbes have been discovered on microplastics at multiple locations in the North Atlantic. This so-called plastosphere can help the transport of harmful algae species, microbes, and pathogens. Microplastics are also a threat to larger organisms, such as the endangered northern right whale. Mr. Speaker, closer to home, scientists have found millions of these microbeads in just 1 square kilometer of parts of our Great Lakes, as a result of a number of companies adding them to their consumer products. Sometimes microbeads are used to help exfoliate the skin. Other times they are added to products to make them sparkle. Research by the Institute for Environmental Studies found that a 200 milliliter bottle contained as much as 21 grams of microplastics, or roughly 1/10 of its weight. Mr. Speaker, microbeads are commonly made of polyethylene or polypropylene, and they range in size from 0.0004 to 1.24 millimeters, making them too small to be filtered out by wastewater treatment plants. As a result, these tiny beads pass through our wastewater treatment filters and end up in our lakes and rivers. These beads are often buoyant and can soak up toxins like a sponge. And since they resemble the size of fish eggs, environmentalists are concerned that the microplastics are making their way into the food chain via fish, birds, and mammals. Scientists have recently raised alarm, warning that microbeads might have harmful effects on human health. For example, some evidence suggests that microbeads can absorb persistent organic pollutants. Mr. Speaker, research spanning all 5 Great Lakes was undertaken in 2012 and 2013. Unlike in the ocean, where the researchers found, quote, confetti-like bits of degraded plastic up to 5 millimeters in size, the researchers trawling the Great Lakes found large amounts of, quote, really tiny plastic fragments and beads up to 1 millimeter. And as they followed the flow of the water through the Great Lakes, the plastic count increased. The highest concentration was found in Lake Ontario, with the counts of up to 1.1 million plastic particles per square kilometer. Mr. Speaker, there is increasing momentum in the United States to get microbeads out of products. Last year, Illinois became the first state to pass legislation that would outright ban the sale of personal care products that contain microbeads by the end of 2019. Illinois Governor Pat Quinn said, quote, banning microbeads will help ensure clean waters across Illinois and set an example for our nation to follow. Lake Michigan and the many rivers and lakes across our state are among our most important natural resources, end of quote. Chemist Sherry Mason, who conducted the first study that found microbeads floating in the Great Lakes, said that while she's glad to see Illinois leading the way, she's troubled by the far-off deadline. Quote, the later date means more microbeads are going down the drain before we're really taking the measures that need to be taken, end of quote, said Mason, an associate professor at the State University of New York. Mr. Speaker, just this week, Governor Christie signed legislation making New Jersey the second state in the United States to ban the substances. The law prohibits the manufacturing, sale, and promotion in the state of any personal care product with microbeads which are made from polyethylene. Senator Christopher Bateman said, quote, "By signing this bill into law, we are placing our state at the forefront of a national effort to eliminate the dangers this product poses to our environment and the water supply. The only way to keep our drinking water safe and protect our beautiful rivers is to stop production and get these items off our shelves." End of quote. The law would be phased in, beginning with the ban on the production of products containing microbeads in January 2018. By January 2020, people would be prohibited from selling or promoting over-the-counter products containing the substances. Mr. Speaker, according to Environmental Defense, a ban is, quote, "looking promising" in Indiana, and lawmakers in California, Maine, Minnesota, New York, Ohio, Vermont, Washington, and Wisconsin have also considered or are considering new laws banning the beads. To reiterate, in the United States, 2 states, Illinois and New Jersey, have passed laws banning the use of microbeads in personal care products. 9 other states are considering similar measures. In Canada, a private member's bill to ban microbeads has been introduced in Ontario's legislature, but neither the federal government or the other provinces have taken similar action. Mr. Speaker, in addition to legislative action, the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, a coalition of Canadian and U.S. mayors from 114 cities along the water bodies, has raised awareness about the microbead problem within their communities and pushed companies to eliminate them from their products. Quote, "We think we've done a pretty good job," said Executive Director David Ulrich, though he acknowledges, quote, "there is always more that the initiative could be doing," end of quote. Mr. Speaker, CBC reported in June 2014 that a number of personal care product manufacturers have promised to cut microbeads from their products in the coming years, but dates vary. Mr. Speaker, in January 2015, Australia, Belgium, Luxembourg, Sweden, and the Netherlands issued a joint call to ban the microplastics used in personal care products, saying the measure will protect marine ecosystems and seafood, such as mussels, from contamination. The joint statement was forwarded to the European Union's 28 environment ministers and stated that the elimination of microplastics in products, and in particular in cosmetics, quote, "is of utmost priority." Although it is evident that alternatives to microplastics are available, hundreds of tons of microplastics are still being released onto the European Union market each year. The Netherlands is particularly worried because of concerns that seafood, including its national production of mussels, could suffer from microplastic pollution. Quote, "There is still a large degree of uncertainty, but what we already know gives us cause for concern," the Netherlands state in its call for action. Quote, "In this case, the precautionary principle applies," end of quote. Mr. Speaker, governments from around the world present at the first UN Environment Assembly adopted a resolution on marine plastic debris and microplastics. They called for strengthened action, in particular by addressing such materials at the source, and requested the United Nations Environment Program, or UNEP, to present scientific assessments on microplastics for consideration by the next session of the Assembly. UNEP, through the Global Partnership on marine litter is also supporting initiatives such as, quote, Beat the Microbead, a phone application that allows consumers to quickly identify personal care products containing microbeads in its efforts to reduce influx of waste in the marine environment. Mr. Speaker, concern is growing over the threat that widespread plastic waste poses to marine life, with conservative estimates of the overall financial damage of plastics to marine ecosystems standing at US $13 billion each year. UN Undersecretary General and UNEP Executive Director said, quote, plastics have come to play a crucial role in modern life, but the environmental impacts of the way we use them cannot be ignored. Reports show that recycling, reducing, and redesigning products that use plastics can bring multiple green economy benefits, from reducing economic damage to marine ecosystems and the tourism and fisheries industries, vital for many developing countries, to bringing savings and opportunities for innovation to companies while reducing reputational risks. In the polar region, scientists have recently found tiny pieces of plastic trapped in sea ice. Transported by ocean currents across great distances, these contaminated particles eventually become a source of chemicals in our food. The key course of action is to prevent plastic debris from entering the environment in the first place, which translates into a single powerful objective: reduce, reuse, recycle. Mr. Speaker, there have been many reliable reports of environmental damage due to plastic waste. Illness or death when ingested by sea creatures such as turtles, entanglement of animals such as dolphins and whales, and damage to critical habitats such as coral reefs. There are also concerns about chemical contamination, invasive species spread by plastic fragments, and economic damage to the fishing and tourism industries in many countries. Mr. Speaker, what recommendations have been put forth to address this issue? Companies should monitor their plastic use and publish the results in annual reports. Companies could commit to reducing the environmental impact of plastic through clear targets and deadlines, and innovate to increase resource efficiency and recycling. An increased focus on awareness campaigns to discourage littering and prevent plastic waste from reaching the ocean. An application, we have this, an application that allows consumers to check whether a product contains microbeads is already available and is expanding its coverage internationally. And we heard today, this is a motion that the NDP brought forward. The Environmental Parliamentary Secretary for the government is asking people to support this motion. It's important. Other recommendations, since plastic particles can be ingested by marine organisms and potentially accumulate and deliver toxins through the food web, efforts should be stepped up to fill the knowledge gaps. Mr. Speaker, these beads are affecting our waters. The plastics absorb dangerous chemicals, are ingested by fish and other wildlife, causing DNA damage and even death. And the link between the problem and the cause is clear. The beads found in the Great Lakes were tested and were found to have come from products like body wash, facial cleansers, and toothpaste. Mr. Speaker, microbeads is an important issue, and this is an important debate, and it's really positive to see this Parliament coming together and recognizing this problem. We have not always agreed when it comes to the environment. The government does not have a positive record when it comes to the environment. The 2008 Climate Change Performance Index ranked Canada 56th of 57 countries in terms of tackling emissions. In 2009 and again in 2013, the Conference Board of Canada ranked Canada 15th of 17 wealthy industrial nations on environmental performance. In 2010, Simon Fraser University ranked Canada 24th of 25 OECD nations on environmental performances. So it's important that we're coming together and everyone's saying this is an important issue on microbeads. The government also gutted environmental legislation of the last 50 years through Economic Plans 2012 and 2013, and Bills C-38 and Bill C-45. It severely cut the budget to Environment Canada. It canceled the National Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy, and we have government scientists who are muzzled. The government's environmental policies have been criticized by policymakers, scientists, Canadians, the international community, and repeatedly by the prestigious international journal Nature. Mr. Speaker, water is the foundation of life, and it is essential for socioeconomic systems and healthy ecosystems. The World Bank states that, quote, water is at the center of economic and social development and is elemental across economic sectors, including agriculture, energy, and industry. Mr. Speaker, the government stripped federal oversight from thousands of Canadian waterways through Bill C-45 and reduced protection of thousands of Canadian lakes. Mr. Speaker, going forward, Canada needs a national water strategy, and our country is well placed to become a global leader in water. For example, the Canadian Water Network, a national network of centers of excellence, can address practical challenges to be a source of new startup companies and train the next generation of researchers and skilled workers. Canada also has a relatively high level of water infrastructure regulation and water management systems. The most recent Conference Board of Canada report on the environment ranks Canada 4th of 17 peer countries in water quality. Canada also has a growing number of competitive water companies providing goods and services to world markets. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, again, I thank the NDP for bringing this forward. I thank the Parliamentary Secretary for asking everyone to support this motion. I also hope the government will work to protect Canada's coastline, establish a network of marine protected areas in Canada's waters, encourage the sustainable use of coastal and marine resources, prioritize clean water, restore our freshwater ecosystems, work to clean up contaminated sediment, and protect and restore essential habitat. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.